Hello and welcome back to another episode of Stories. Let me ask you guys a question. What do you get when you take a podcaster who started out in the very beginning and now is working for one of the bigger name podcast hosts? You get Rob Walsh, that's who. So sit back, relax, and grab your favorite beverage, and I'll see you on the other side. See you there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another show of Stories. Today on the show, I'm joined with Rob Walsh. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Well, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
I am a podcaster. I've been podcasting now since 2004. People ask what my job is, what my hobby is. They're both podcasting. So when I'm not working on podcasting, I'm on podcasts. I work for Libsyn, Liberated Syndication. I've worked for Libsyn since 2007. So almost 16 years now that I've worked for Libsyn, and again, I've been in the space since the fall of 2004. Doing my first podcast was called Podcast 411, which was a podcast all about podcasting. The first podcast about podcasting, and I interviewed other podcasters. That was the whole idea behind the podcast.
All right. So how did you get into podcasting in general?
It was just luck. I had just gotten my MBA from UConn in the spring of 2004, and I was working and traveling, and I needed something to fill my evenings. All of a sudden, I had all this free time hobby while I was traveling, and I was like, I need something to do. So I heard of this thing called podcasting. I said, well, I'll do a podcast. That should be pretty easy. I read this article in Engadget, and it wasn't that easy. The article said, if you want a podcast, just drop this enclosure tag in your RSS feed and you're good. And I'm like, well, what's an RSS feed? What's an enclosure tag? So I had to learn about that. I had to learn about doing some recording and editing. And in the fall of 2014 or 2004, I got my podcast worked out, figured it out how to do it. I launched the podcast and a website to make it easier for others to podcast. So I put very detailed instructions, step by step. Here's how you podcast. Because up to that point, there was no detailed instructions on how to podcast.
All right. Do you remember your first show?
The first episode, yeah. The first episode was an interview with Chris Rockwell from the podcast called The Daily Download. And not download like a media file. This was a podcaster who recorded his episodes when he stepped into the bathroom to take care of his daily business. So that was my first interview, was with the guest who recorded his podcast from the bathroom. Yes.
All right. How did you get involved working with Libsyn?
I had a podcast about podcasting, and the very first podcast hosting company was Libsyn. So I knew about Libsyn, and I started using Libsyn in March of 2005. Because my podcast was getting popular and it was chewing up the bandwidth, and it was going to start costing me a lot of money from where I was hosting or self-hosting. So I had found out about it. I got to meet the guys. I got to be friends with them that started Libsyn, and I just started promoting Libsyn. And after 2 years of promoting Libsyn, they said, enough's enough. Stop promoting it. Just come work for us. Or not stop promoting it. Stop promoting it for free and come work for us. So that's how I got at Libsyn. It was just about, I was a big believer in the product for a couple of years before I came to the company, and I'm still and always have been a big believer in the product.
All right. What advice would you give to those who want to get into podcasting?
The biggest advice I'd say is figure out what you want for the title of your show, figure out what you want for the format of your show, and then start podcasting. Because once you can figure out those two items, do it. Don't wait. There's never a perfect time to launch. The best time to launch is now. As soon as you figure out what you want for your title and your format, those are really important to get those two down.
Now, would you suggest episodic or serial, or?
Depends on what you want to do. Some people, they just want to take an old public domain novel and republish it as an audiobook and make it a podcast and have interaction with the audience as they release the novel, and maybe even change it a little bit. You can do serialized that way. But for most podcasts, the 95% plus are episodic. And that's just where you're releasing new content, but it doesn't really matter where someone starts listening. So most podcasters are going to be episodic, unless there's a compelling reason to be serial.
All right. I know from reading in the groups, one of the big questions I see a lot is, what do I do if I want to use music in my podcast? What do you tell people if they want to put music in their show?
Don't do that. No, the podcast is a download. So this is a download is technically a mechanical copy. That means there's no licenses that cover podcasting for RIA and music, regardless of what CSAC and ASCAP and BMI might tell you. Their licenses do not fully cover you. So there is no way to get a license to play Led Zeppelin music on your podcast. You have to pay Harry Fox. You've got to pay the other guys I just mentioned. And even then, you're not fully covered. Then you have to go and get a deal with the record labels. And they don't like podcasts. They think MP3s are a 4-letter word. So what I say to people is there's public domain. There's what's called pod safe music. This is music you can use on a podcast. And you have to find pod safe music. Pixabay is a really good place to find music. Megatune is another place you can get music for podcasting. ccmixter.org. Those are good resources for finding music you can use in your podcast. But you can't, I had someone one time launch a Led Zeppelin podcast.
Oh, God.
And I said, you can't play their music in the podcast. They go, why? I bought the CDs. I own the music. No.
You don't own
own
the
the right
rights.
to listen to it, but you do not have the right to rebroadcast it and make mechanical copies. And that's what podcasting is. It's a mechanical copy. So what I say to people that are looking to use music, make sure it's pod safe music. Google pod safe music and you'll find out more information what it means. But again, go to Pixabay or go to Magnatune or go to ccmixter.org and find bed music from non-signed artists that you can use in your podcast.
I know one of my favorite sites I use is called Gemondine, I believe it's called. It's a great site because they aren't signed artists. They're just artists that want to put out their music for people to use.
Yeah, you have to do some work. I'll tell you that right now. It's not, you can't open up Spotify, you can't open up Apple Music and then find music that way. That's not where you're getting your music from. You need to do a little bit of legwork to find music.
And also, what was your most memorable experience doing your podcast?
I had a couple. I think my favorite would be interviewing Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones, for those who don't know, Quincy Jones is the most prolific record producer of all time. He produced Michael Jackson and many others. And when I went to interview him beforehand, his people said, you have 20 minutes, no more, 20 minutes. And you have to give us the questions you're going to ask. And I gave him a list of like 10 or 15 questions or whatever it was. And I asked Quincy the first question and he went on this tangent and I just followed him and we never went back to any of the other questions. We were 45 minutes into the interview and I said to him, I go, is this okay? I really feel bad. Your people told me 20 minutes and we're already 45 minutes in. He goes, it doesn't matter. They're my people. They work for me because I'm having fun. And so he was having a good time in the interview. And that was probably my favorite one of all my interviews.
It must have been quite an honor to land like somebody like him on your show.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten lucky. I've had some really good guests over the years. I interviewed Ronald Moore, at the time the head writer producer of Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, the Battlestar Galactica, and he's also was the head writer and producer for Deep Space Nine. And other shows. So Ronald Moore that was one that I really enjoyed doing. I got to interview Senator John Edwards right after he had ran for vice president. I got to interview Larry Kudlow and other celebrities over the years, Rich Eisen. So I've had some good celebrities on my show.
That leads me to a question. What is your advice on someone who wants to interview somebody within that kind of A-list to B-list? What is your advice to like how they go after them?
Yeah, IMDb Pro Figure
Yeah.
out everybody that you want to interview, sign up for 1 month of IMDb Pro, and go through and find the agent PR contacts for everybody you want to interview. And then look at when they're releasing something, a project. When is our movie coming out? You don't want to be reaching out to their PR person while they're in the midst of producing the movie, because you're not going to hear anything back. But 2 months, 3 months before the movie comes out, you reach out to their PR person, because they are obligated to do so many public appearances and press junket, whatever you call it, the late night circuit type thing. They have so many of those appearances they have to do contractually to promote the movie, that when you reach out to that PR person 2, 3 months before the movie comes out, you're checking a box for them. You just made their life easier. And
Mm.
and if you're just starting out, you can exaggerate on what your numbers are. It's a PR person you're talking to, right?
Yeah.
Don't feel too guilty about that. But that's how you get celebrities, and just persistence. Just over and over sending out. Ronald Moore, I must have sent out to NBC and over and over multiple times, and to his PR person, and finally I got him at the right time, which was right before a new season of Battlestar Galactica came out, and that's what worked. And then the interview went so well that the people at NBC liked the interview, that then they connected me with Collins, was the lead actor from Eureka when that season was launching. Hey, can you interview him? I'm like, absolutely. Doing a podcast for it? Absolutely.
I loved
So
Eureka. It was an amazing show.
yeah, and that was a fun interview with him, because he's Canadian, and I was always like, well, I'm
Mhm.
like, why are Canadians always funny? It seems to be comedians come from Canada.
Mm. Now let's learn a little bit more about you. Where did you grow up?
Long Island, Bayport. It's a small town on South Shore, middle of the island, in Suffolk County. So that I grew up there, and then all the way till 17, graduated high school and went off to University of Dayton, Ohio. So that was where I grew up, between the two places.
All right. What motivates you, inspires you, and drives you?
Yeah, I think motivation is free speech. That's why I've always loved about Libsyn and podcasting. To me, podcasting was a place where anybody could have a voice. There's a joke that NPR was supposed to be that, right? That was supposed to be the voice for everybody. And then inside NPR, I was talking to one of the people, and they said, yeah, they go, when podcasting came around, they said, we understand that anybody should have a voice, but not everybody. And they kind of looked at podcasting as a little bit of competition, and too democratized. You can never democratize the voice. You can never have too much voice ability to get your voice out there, in my opinion. So I think what drives me, motivates me, is the free speech. I'm very proud of being at Libsyn, when the company's name is Liberated Syndication.
All right. What's the best compliment you've ever gotten?
The best compliment I ever got, and that would probably go back to Quincy Jones, where again, he said he was having so much fun in the interview, he didn't care about the time. That to me was my high watermark of doing interviews. That had a lot of fun with that. I realized that I threw away the instructions, and I just followed the guest down the rabbit hole,
Mm-hmm.
and had a lot of fun with that.
All right. What's your biggest failure, and what did you learn from that experience?
Oh, this is an easy one. Got an email. It was July of 2005. Got an email, and they said, hey, the senator is going to be launching a podcast. Can you help produce his podcast? We see you're doing one for Senator John Edwards. Can you help this senator with his podcast? And I said, I think it's going to be competition. He's most likely also going to run. So I don't think it's right that I do this, because I'm working for Senator Edwards at the time. I go, but here's a person in Chicago I know that can help you out and do that. And that was, at the time, Senator Obama.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so I turned that down. And about 2 weeks later, I'm talking to the people from the Edwards camp, and I said, oh, yeah, I just want to let you know, Senator Obama is going to be launching a podcast. And they go, oh, how'd you find out? I go, oh, they reached out to me to see if I produce it. And they go, oh, are you doing it? And I said, well, no, I thought that'd be competition. They go, oh, no, you can go ahead and do it. But I've already, at that point, had already passed it off to someone else, and someone else had the job. So
Oh God.
I learned from that. You asked what I learned. I learned to ask when you're not sure.
Okay. All right.
I had just asked. And then later on, I actually wound up doing, I got approached by Governor Bill Richardson. So I did his podcast as well. So I had Senator Edwards and Bill Richardson. I could have had President Obama's. And I remember watching up there on the Democratic debate. It was down to 4 candidates for the 2008 election. And it was Richardson, Obama, Edwards, and Hillary Clinton up on stage. And I was like, oh, I could have had 3 of the 4. So yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a lot that one email, just not asking, not taking the time to just reach out and go, hey, I got approached. Is it okay? Yes or no? That's all I had to do. And I would have gotten to meet Obama and would have done his podcast.
That reminds me of a funny story. I mean, I'm in Chicago, and Obama's from Chicago, and my nephews were played soccer when they were younger. So we go out to watch them play soccer, and my mom's like, that's Michelle Obama over there. I'm gonna go up and introduce her. This is before he became president. This is when he was still senator. So she walked up, introduced herself, and talked. And it turns out now my one nephew is somewhat friends with his 2 daughters still.
Oh, nice. See, just take a chance. You got to take chances in life.
All right. Tell me about 3 influential people in your life and how they impacted you.
Well, obviously, most impactful is going to be my father, and he influenced me just by the ethics that he had. He has. He's still with us, and that he's just a really genuinely a great person, and he did great work ethic. He worked 2 jobs when I was growing up. He was a police officer and an electrician, so he worked really hard to support us, to put me to college. I got my work ethic from him. So when I work, which is way too many hours, but I got my work ethic from my dad and morals from my dad. He did what he said what he did. And I think that's a great way to live. He was a police officer that didn't bring home fireworks at 4th of July. Right. So, it's just little things that I learned from him. Another really influential person would have been Ken Knapp, who was the first person that I worked for out of college as an engineer. And he really taught me how to be an engineer. You learn about engineering in college. You learn how to become an engineer on the job, and who you work for and how they approach things really does influence you quite a bit. And I was very grateful and fortunate to work for someone like Ken, who just took me to the next level and had a great time doing engineering work. And then after that, my wife, she just, I wouldn't be able to have done podcasting. I wouldn't have been able to have done the things I did. I wouldn't have been able to start podcasting company, be where I am today if it wasn't for her support and insight, because she has a remarkable understanding of the populace. When she sees something that's going to be trendy, she gets it. So I think those 3 people probably have the most influence on me.
All right. What makes you feel inspired or like your best self?
When I'm helping people launch their podcast, I think that really inspires me. Knowing that I just got someone else launched. So I love that part of podcasting, what I do for Libsyn and my Libsyn Pro customers, getting their podcast launch, helping them get that RSS feed out with the first episode, seeing it live in Apple Podcasts and Spotify and the other places. that really inspires me because I know I got another show off the ground. I got another one to go. I helped another person. Seeing emails come in, someone found one of my books about how to podcast, or saw one of the questions I put up on the Apple support forums about how to podcast, and that they said thanks, and that helped them get going. That inspires me. That I love that.
All right. Finish the sentence. I am at my best when.
I'm at my best when it's 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning and I'm banging through work. That's where I am most creative, where I'm most productive, is after midnight, before 4 a.m. In that window, that's where I get my best stuff done.
All right. If you could turn back time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what would you tell him about where you are now in life?
Hmm. It's funny. I recently had a letter that we wrote when I was 16 years old, and it was to not be open till like for whatever it was 30 or 35 until recently, and I opened it up, so got to see what my 16-year-old self got to tell me, which was don't underestimate the power of the teenager. We know what we're doing, da da da. It was like, yeah, okay. I would say to myself, don't overestimate what you think you know. Be willing to learn, be open-minded, be more open to the ideas of others around you. That's something you learn with age. So that would be something I would have liked to have told myself earlier on. Lessons you learn the hard way, right? But where I'm at now, I wouldn't want to ruin it. I wouldn't spoil it because I like where I'm at. So I wouldn't give any clues to him to mess that up. I might give him the lottery numbers, though, from a lottery.
Yeah.
15, 21, 24, 30, 31, 32. There you go. Get that lottery in early December 1989 or something.
All right. If you can have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
Um, Anything, a billboard. um, Start podcasting at Libsyn. Again, that's just that's who I am. That's just what it's it's what I've been doing for the last 16 plus years, telling people to do that. So yeah, put it up on a billboard.
All right. What do you think the world will look like in 5 years from now?
Not much different than it does today. Not much different than it did 5 years ago. It'll be a little less masks, um, a little bit more open from that point of view. But a few more electric cars versus gas cars. But overall, not all that different. Maybe people looking at the first people back on the moon since by then, hopefully. But since since I was a wee lad, that's one of my earliest memories, was one of the moon missions. But yeah, hopefully that's what we're seeing in 5 years. But otherwise, overall, not that much different. And good Lord, I hope we have a president that's under the age of 70.
All right. What was your favorite subject in school?
Science. Yeah, not even. Yeah, I was a big science nerd, always have been. So physics, absolutely. But
All
I
right.
mean, I liked all science, but physics probably top. Computer science as well.
All right. Would you consider yourself an introvert, an extrovert, or an ambivert?
Omnivert. I'm an extrovert in some ways. I go out to all these conferences. I talk. I've spoken hundreds of times. But outside of events, I really have only a couple close friends. And in the day-to-day life, I'm not overly out there. But when it comes to work or it comes to podcasting, I'm out. That's my extrovert self. And of course, I podcast. You have to be a part of an extrovert to be a podcaster.
All right. If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be and why?
Yeah, again, podcasting. It's what I did. I'm in the Podcast Hall of Fame. Being part of the Podcast Hall of Fame which to me, I'm just proud of, because again, it comes back to, I got to help a lot of people podcast. So that's the one thing, just helping people podcast.
All right. Well, tell me about where you are now in life.
I'm in a good place now. Libsyn's doing really well. Personally, our family's doing well. My older son is getting ready to go off to college. My younger son just started high school. So we're a good place. And it's a good spot. My younger son, we moved here to Nashville for him because he suffers from dyslexia. So we moved here for a dyslexia school. So I was fortunate
Mm.
enough to be in a position where I could get to move and get him at the best school we could for him. And my older son, we got him into really good high school when we moved here, and it's really paid off. So I'm pretty happy with where we are.
All right.
And I got a cute French bulldog. So which is like, he's the best French bulldog, totally house trained, and I mean, he's just the best.
Was he a rescue?
No, he wasn't. We got him from a breeder, but he was an extra dog that was born in that group, and he had the lady bred them for showing, and he had a little issue with his tail, so he could never be shown. So
Oh,
we rescued him from the perspective of, he didn't have to he didn't go out and be a show dog.
all right. Now we get on to the questions everyone wants to hear. What is your favorite word?
My favorite word, oh, podcast. I'm going to stick with the theme, right? How can
All
that
right.
not be?
All right.
Yeah,
What is your least favorite word?
live audio. 2 words.
All right. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, and emotionally?
Uh, Creativity, well, spiritually and emotionally, Dayton Flyers. I'm a huge college basketball fanatic, so we'll just get those 2 out of the way. That's outside of podcasting, my other biggest passion is the Dayton Flyers. So college hoops, basketball hoops in general. I love college hoops and basketball pro and any type of hoops. I used to play a lot. So that's passionate. Creativity, again, I just like creating audio and about anything. I used to write. I need to get back writing. Haven't written, so I should do some audiobooks. I should write and do some books someday. It's a future project. I'll be doing all of my writing between 12 and 4 in the morning.
Anyway, what turns you off?
Xavier fans. Basketball people will get that. And then anybody that says that they have a guaranteed way to grow your audience. Any service that's trying to sell snake oil to podcasters, those really turn me off. I really hate that. They just they take advantage of podcasters. Everybody wants their show to grow. People know that, and they offer up really bogus solutions, way too expensive, and people spend all this money and time and doing all the wrong things to promote their podcast, when really all that matters is having good content and interacting with your audience.
All right. What is your favorite curse word?
Oh, the F-bomb, because you can use it so many different ways. I think my favorite television scene of all time was the F-bomb tirade they went on the Wire. If you ever get a chance, look up the Wire and F-bomb and say, F-bomb segment, and they go for about 4 or 5 minutes where there's the only word they say is that, and they say it in all different ways and expressions. So that just shows you how flexible that word is.
Have you ever seen, I know it's a YouTube video, or heard it? It's called The History of the Word Fuck.
I have not.
I
No.
gotta send it to you. It's pretty humorous. All right. What is your least favorite word?
The C word.
What is
Right.
your favorite? What is your
Yeah.
favorite word?
Well, you said, favorite word overall.
Yeah.
Well, again, I'll
Oh,
go back to podcast, right? Yeah.
all right. All right. What sound or noise do you love?
Um, The one that's played right at the end when you're done with the recording, right? Because you've gotten through that interview, that one where the recording's ending. Yeah, because if you, that's an accomplishment.
All right. What sound or noise do you hate?
The one that uh, yeah, what's that noise? Probably because I got to edit it out.
All right.
Having editing so many of those.
The sound of someone smacking their lips.
Yep,
All right. What's your favorite color?
blue,
What's your least favorite color?
lime green. It just doesn't look good on me.
All right. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Well, see, I've done two professions. So, again, I've done it where I was an engineer and now podcaster. So I've kind of had two different careers in my life already. Uh, you know, other than what I've done, um, athletics, doing play by play, maybe that would have been a career I would have loved doing play by play.
All right. What profession would you not like to do?
Dancing. Oh, I'm so bad. I'm so bad. Singing too, I put singing in there. Either one. Dancing and singing. Being a singing dancer. There's a career. Yeah.
Mm,
Fred Astaire. Nope. Nope. Nope.
all right. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Oops, sorry. Six more years. You're too soon.
All right. When you arrive at when you arrive at heaven, who would you like to meet?
Steve Jobs. I never got to interview him. He was the one I wanted to interview. Missed that.
All right. What audio or podcast would you recommend?
Hardcore history. Yeah. It's the one I always recommend. Hardcore history.
All right. And finally, where can people find out more about you and Libsyn?
Uh, on Twitter, if you want to follow me on Twitter, at podcast411. You can go to podcast411.com to find out more. There's a about page, and you can listen to some of my old podcast interviews. If you're into iPhone, I have another one called Today in iOS. Just go to todayinios.com. And then if you want to learn more about me in podcasting, thefeed.libsyn.com. That's the podcast I do every other week with Elsie Escobar. And then finally, if you just want to reach out to me, make it real easy. Rob@libsyn.com, Libsyn.com.
And that's it, everyone. That was Rob Walsh. I'll see you in the next one, everybody. See you there.